And I think that we can all have both of those things in our heads at the same time. I am a little frustrated that there's this kind of deflection that happens, in my view, whenever we start to talk about, I sit here and I'm very open to criticize my team, as it were. I'm critical of Bernie Sanders, I'm critical of Marianne Williamson, I'm critical of liberals, who I don't consider to be on my team, as it were, but are much closer to me ideologically than, let's say, Republicans. But when it comes time to not just criticize a conservative, but someone who is literally running cover for a self-described Nazi, I feel like there's a necessary amount of tension and pushback, and I'm not saying with you in particular, Robbie, but generally speaking on the internet, there doesn't seem to be that same openness to freedom of thought, ideas, self-criticism, and honesty that some corners of the internet really pride themselves as having had. So I do think there needs to be skepticism. I think the article is good in investigating why skepticism is so popular. I think skepticism is a good thing, but I do think it should be applied in an even way, and that we should all be able to reflect on ways in which our own defensiveness about media bias sometimes obscures what's happening.
Definitely apply skepticism. I mean, we're critical of, I'm critical of, I don't, like you, well, I don't know exactly how you consider, if you consider yourself part of the Democratic Party or not. I don't really consider myself part of the Republican Party, like you and your party. So I'm very critical of it and Trump, and which I've recognized that the ideological coalition that has dominated the Republican Party, with some exceptions on foreign policy, is actually kind of anathema to my own ideas, and I've been criticizing it for that direction. I think you get a lot of criticism of, I guess, both parties and both media ecosystems. Maybe we're more critical of the mainstream media ecosystem because we consider ourselves not part of it.
But
equally,
don't you think that these independent, look?
But I don't think anyone would watch our show and think we've been overly kind to Elon Musk.
No, I'm not talking, I specifically said I'm not talking about you or this show. I'm talking about look, there are problems with corporate media, with mainstream establishment media. You can address some of those problems by going independent, but there are additional separate problems with independent media, including absolutely no oversight and no kind of structural liability when people start to say things that are patently false. Tim Pool has been connected to this particular shooter. The shooter likes Tim Pool. Now, that's not Tim Pool's fault necessarily. People like who they like. The guy maybe also liked to watch Succession. That doesn't mean it's Succession's fault that he murdered people so heinously. But when someone is saying, hey, I like you, I like your ideology, I think that what you're saying is making me, those kinds of things, and the response is, okay, but do we really know that he was a Nazi? And not, oh my gosh.
Do we really know that he's a Nazi is an unhelpful framing. I agree. There are, if you put a Nazi tattoo on yourself, like, I might also wonder, what else has gone wrong with you? What are you a crazy person? You've studied, like, you've sat down with Mein Kampf, you're an expert, you've committed yourself to the tenets of furthering Nazism, and and now you're implementing phase one, which is to do a bunch of violent crime and murder. Do you know what I'm saying? There's not a necessary, like, I think people who are damaged, deranged, and crazy seek out validating extremist.
This is about Tim Pool and Elon Musk's response to the shooter. So I know everyone wants to go and have a conversation about mental health and what caused the shooter to shoot. We're talking right now about a media criticism article. And we're talking about these media figures' response, the owner of Twitter and a major podcaster's response to learning about a shooter's ideology. Their response was to try to cast doubt on that the shooter, in fact, had that ideology, because their perception was that if the shooter had that Nazi ideology, it would make them look bad. Now, why would you think that someone who had a Nazi ideology makes you look bad?
Because they're trying to tar those people, Tim Pool and Elon Musk, as Nazis.
Well, Elon Musk volunteered himself into it by weighing in. So really, he made the choice to piggyback on Tim Pool's like obstruction campaign, attempt to obscure what was going on there. Tim Pool, like I said, I don't know, I've said this a million times, I don't want to belabor the point. You can just say I'm not a Nazi and I don't like that and move on. And then people piling on him would be in bad faith.
But we're trying to probe motives. The motives of the mainstream media people is to say Nazism is rising because Tim Pool is allowed to speak and we need to shut him down to prevent Nazi violence everywhere.
Isn't it possible just to disagree with that? Can I sit here and say, I think that some of the reports about the rise of Nazism are overstated, or a rise of white supremacy. I think others are very much true, and the people are in denial. But I think that you shouldn't preemptively prevent people absent much higher standard, a much higher First Amendment standard, from being able to talk and be on social media apps, et cetera. In fact, it's another thing I've criticized Elon Musk for. When he kicked Kanye West off the platform, I have defended Kanye West despite thinking his tweets were abhorrent. His swastika tweet, I think, was not in violation of Twitter's policy. So I am consistently criticizing all of these figures for violating these free speech principles. I also am criticizing Tim Pool's choice here to, instead of distancing himself from someone who's a self-identified Nazi, trying to frankly lie about the relationship, about the identity, the self-described, well-corroborated, well-documented political choices of that shooter. And I think that's a problem in addition to anybody who's trying to do
But I didn't say otherwise. It sounds like, again, I think you're arguing against some maybe people online who are doing that. I said that wasn't a good move for them because it seems pretty obvious that this person does actually have a Nazi tattoo, and I
Robbie,
believe what the fan was.
A few minutes ago, you said, well, this seems to be you bring that up a lot. This seems to be a focus up for you a lot. So I'm explaining to you why I come back to it.
Every time you brought it up, I've said, yeah, seems like a Nazi. That was a bad move. That was just wrong to say that, to suggest that it was fabricated or something.
Yeah. So but it's. Again,
so we're not arguing.
No, but it's about Tim Pool, and I'm bringing that as an example. So if you agree with me that it is wrong of Tim Pool to have taken that position, that the kind of a world of skepticism that leads people to not believe their eyes in a context like that is a problem.
Skepticism that the photos were doctored, it was not accurate, or healthy.
Well, it was, just to be really clear, what was so bizarre about it is that we knew this shooter.
As I said,
there were
the last
tattoos.
5 times we talked
there
about
are tattoos on this deceased shooter.
Right.
The tattoos, pictures of the tattoos are of him alive, sometime in the past. Right? We know that he's alive in the photos. It seems like he took the photos right after he got the tattoo, because that's oftentimes when people take their shirt off and document what they've just done.
I didn't get out my magnifying glass and Sherlock Holmes this. The local sheriff said the guy has the tattoos,
but no,
so I believe that he has the tattoos.
Close the loop. Because the picture of the tattoos that was very clear with him shirtless was an older picture, people were saying, well, the tattoos are fresh. As though that's a photo of him after he perpetrated the event or just before he did the shooting. So again, there's a certain kind of very obvious lack of logic to some of these conspiracy theories that people like Elon Musk are falling for. And yet, because of the environment, getting back to the article, because of the environment that we're in addition to really good things that people should be skeptical about rising to the top, some kind of bizarre stuff is rising to the top. And I do think that we're going to have to continue to have a national conversation about how to tease out those different kinds of stories and make sure that I think a healthy environment of skepticism isn't used to advance, I think, ideologies that are very pernicious and hateful. That's all.
They should have said, the mainstream people should have said, the idea that he has Nazi tattoos is Russia-originated misinformation, and then everyone would accept that he has Nazi tattoos. So that would obviously not be true. Okay, more rising after this.